If you worked hard to pre-order, get there, get home, get the game booted up, and start uploading right away, you would get the day one boost in attention and views because of your hard work. But I was actually regarded as one of the top YouTube gamers in the world. I can tell you right now, there are people who have less views than me who are in these agreements and relationships with game companies, okay? I know it for a fact. I've seen some of them. It's a horrible, horrible slippery slope that we have slid the down and don't realize we're sliding down, okay? I want to talk about this big news story because this is something that I've been talking about for a very long time. And every time I mention it, I get a lot of people who they come back at me and they're like, oh, Phil, no, you see, you're full of it. You're angry because you're not an insider in the industry and you're not one of the selected few that gets everything for free and gets everything early and yada, 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 okay?
Well, I really hope that you're not here to say the exact opposite, DSP, because all of those statements are true. How many 20-minute cope sessions have we had every time that some random YouTuber gets an opportunity that was never afforded to DSP? How many content creators throughout the years has DSP put down because he thought that the exclusivities that they were given directly affected his business in a negative way? And of course, there's the flip side to that, where early on in his career, Machinima did go out of their way to give him video games to allow him to go to different events. And he absolutely reveled in the idea that he was somebody and that he was getting things that nobody else was getting to do. So like I said, I really just hope that he's not here to say that that's not the case, that he doesn't want to be part of this exclusive group, when it's very clear, given all of the actions that he's taken throughout the years, that that very much is the case.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to explain something to everyone before we even begin with the news story, so you have a frame of reference, okay?
Back in 2010, I used to work at a helicopter company.
I used to be a very prominent YouTuber. It was a long time ago, but I was actually regarded as one of the top YouTube gamers in the world. I was like maybe arguably top 20 channels for gaming at one point. I was never as big as the biggest, but definitely people came to YouTube to watch me play hot new games, to cover them and see what they were on release day. They would want to see my playthrough before they made a judgment about playing a game. It was a long time ago, all right? It was. But it was absolutely black and white truthful. I was one of the well-known guys.
And what he won't be acknowledging right now is that the only reason that he was one of the well-known guys is because there wasn't that many guys to know. That's really the only reason that his legacy ever got any sort of liftoff and ever had any momentum to begin with. He was simply at the right place at the right time. There was never ever really any passion or effort that was put into any of the things that DSP did for his channel. It really was just pumping out content to pump out content because nobody else was doing it. But of course, DSP was a well-known guy. He was white hot popular, don't you know?
Back then, things were very different from today. There was no opportunity whatsoever for you to get early access to a game. Instead, everyone was on equal footing. You had to go to GameStop, you had to go to your local store, whatever it was, to buy the game physically. You couldn't even get these games digitally at the time. You actually had to go buy a physical copy of a video game. Now, I'm talking the years that I started, so probably around 2009, all the way through arguably 2014, 2015. This is how it happened, okay?
And that statement is mostly true. The only exception, of course, being reviewers and games journalists whose job was to review the games. They were absolutely given early copies of the games so that they could do exactly that, and then they would post their reviews onto their websites and then into the magazines like Game Informer. I just wanted to say that out in front so that everyone's on the same page, that getting early review copies of games has been a practice for a very long time. It just existed in a different way than it does now.
It was around 2015-ish that everything started to go digital. Now you could pre-order games online, you could get everything loaded to your console early. And this also is when the practice of certain people getting early access to games becoming commonplace. But before that ever happened, everyone was equal, right? You had to pre-order the game, you had to get in line whenever your local store opened, you had to pick up the game, come home, boot it up like everyone else, and then you got to play it. The only people who got early access copies were actually established gaming journalists. Now, I say that loosely like this today because today that criteria is very loose, but back then, you actually had to work for one of these major publications, you know, IGN, GameSpot, you know, one of these things that everyone knew. Then you would get a game early, you'd review it early, but everyone else had to buy it. You know, me and everyone else on YouTube, we weren't getting stuff early, all right?
And all of that would make sense given the time period that he is talking about. These video game publications and review sites were a tried and trusted way to get out review scores to the audience that these games were trying to reach. Obviously, it didn't stay that way forever, but again, given the time, they didn't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry with internet access out there with early copies of the game.
And it was a very different era, okay? Everyone was on equal ground. If you worked hard to pre-order, get there, get home, get the game booted up, and start uploading right away, you would get the day one boost in attention and views because of your hard work. And it was really equal to everyone, you know, when you could actually do that.
But what about that is hard work, DSP? That's the part of this that I've never really understood. That's the aspect of the DSP legacy that's never made any sense to me. Because none of that is hard work. Purchasing a video game is not hard work. Going to midnight releases is supposed to be a fun and social experience that you enjoy. Playing the video game is supposed to be the most enjoyable part, actually. It's supposed to be the entire point of purchasing the game to begin with. The only part that can even remotely be considered work is the fact that you set up a camcorder in the coffee table in the middle of your living room and you would upload the raw files to YouTube when you were done. But nowhere in that entire process was there any hard work going on. At no point was there any sort of dedication to the craft. At no point was there ever any actual passion in the work. The reality is that any jobless cretin could have done exactly what DSP did because they would have had the amount of time that he did. But of course, DSP said that it was all hard work, so that's the way that it has to be. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, or you're just a dirty detractor and troll, obviously.
And I was one of the guys known for always having that hot new game on release day, putting out the playthrough within 1 to 2 days. I was done with the game, and then I was on to the next, and you could see an early playthrough of that game right on YouTube and judge for yourself if you wanted to buy it. That was where I made my name back in the day. I was the guy who was kind of a Joe average gamer. I wasn't great at the games I played, but I could show you a representation of what it would be like for someone without any prerequisite knowledge of a franchise to jump in and see if you would enjoy it at face value or not.
Saying that you weren't great at these games, DSP, is kind of an understatement because you were goddamn abysmal at 99% of them. It's also quite a stretch to say that you were giving people an accurate representation of what it was like for someone with no prerequisite knowledge to play these games. Because I don't think that the Joe average person who's going to be playing these games is going to be nearly as drunk, hard-headed, or just straight up ignorant as you were. But if that was genuinely your mission statement, if you were trying to be an accurate representation of what a normal person playing the game would look like, you did an absolutely terrible job. And it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody on the internet that you're doing as poorly as you are, that nobody comes to your content and genuinely enjoys it anymore. You apparently had one goal and managed to never achieve it.
Now, that was a lot of different times ago. You know what I mean? Like, very different. Very, very different from how it is today. Today, in the modern era, you may notice it's very rarely when anyone gets to play a game on release day and no one else does. In fact, I was just talking about Street Fighter. There's already people who have the Street Fighter patch. They have Akuma. They have all the balance changes. They're playing it already. Huh? It doesn't come out for another week and a half. Why does a select group get access to this and get to make content of it, but not everybody else, right?
Because somebody has to test the video game, DSP? Aren't you the same person that is constantly complaining that YouTube doesn't beta test anything and that they just release it out to the public? Well, this appears to me to be a great way for Capcom to test out all of the changes that they've made to the game, get public feedback, and even build some hype on it. To me, there's no question why these big names in the community get to test out the patch before everybody else. In fact, it seems pretty obvious, and I'm wondering how you ever got a finance degree if you don't understand how this is a net positive for the company.
Every time there's a new game, you always have certain content creators and streamers who just have the game early. And they're able to put out streams of the game, put out videos of the game, early impressions of the game, reviews of the game, early. Can you get the game? No, but they can. What's up with that?
They're reviewing the game, DSP. You just said that. You just acknowledged that they're making all sorts of content for the game to drum up hype and basically do marketing for the company. The reason that I'm not able to get the game is because I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm simply going to play the game and that's going to be it. I understand the question, I just don't know why you were asking it. Because once again, this whole thing seems pretty straightforward and I'm just wondering how you're confused about it. Especially given the fact that you've been in the field of content creation involving video games for this long, you would have thought that you'd have figured it out by now.
Well, what's happened is the games industry has changed. It used to be, hey, if we put out a good game and the journalists review it early, we get a little bit of a popularity boost and people will run out and buy our game. Instead, what they realize now is that they can get monstrous amounts of free press from people by giving them the game early. And the thing is, it's kind of this, what's the word? You scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of a relationship. It's not necessarily parasitic, but there's a word where it's like two things working together. And I can't remember what that exact word is. I'm sure someone will say it in the chat now, but that's what it is. It's like, if the game company gets over and the content creator gets over, then everyone wins, right? So how does this work?
I know that this is a rhetorical question, but how is it even a rhetorical question that was asked? You just told us how it worked, DSP. You just told us that it was some sort of symbiotic relationship, that's the word that he was looking for, obviously, where the content creator was getting over and the company is getting over. So it's a win-win all around, and people get to see early impressions of the game and accurate reviews from people that they actually enjoy online. Given how he has described the situation so far, it sounds like a net positive for everybody involved, including the people who are just watching the videos and trying to get a good guesstimate on whether or not they're gonna like a game.
Well, first of all, you have to be a symbiotic. People are saying it's symbiotic. There you go. Symbiotic relationship. That's what it is. You have to be of a certain stature or a certain amount of viewership. Is it a huge criteria? No, it's not. I can tell you right now, there are people who have less views than me who are in these agreements and relationships with game companies, okay? I know it for a fact. I've seen some of them. I've seen some of their content and their videos. Their streams and videos get less viewership than me, yet they get everything early, okay?
And I know that he loves to pretend that he's happy that that's not him or his content. That he's happy that he's not in these totally elitist groups, despite him saying that the bar of entry is super low. But you can just tell by the way that he talks about it and the words that he uses that he's coping and seething over this. He's malding even. He's actually sitting here putting down other content creators and shitting on how many views they get while he sits on a dying channel and isn't invited to any of the Cool Kids Club meetings. It's pathetic and the equivalent of saying that you didn't want to go to the party when you weren't even invited to begin with.
What they need to do is they reach out to these PR agents in the industry. Now, these PR agents are on social media. They have ways to reach out. And all you do is you say, hey, here's my channel. Here's my viewership. Here's the games I've covered. If you want to see the style of content I do, I'm interested in such and such games. Let me know. And these people work as middlemen between game publishers and content creators. And they'll send you, you know, a bunch of information about, oh, what about this game? What about this game? What platform would you like this game on? What about this, right? So after you get all of that information hashed out, they will actually send you games early and for free, okay? So you might say, wow, that's a win-win. I'm a content creator. I get a game early and for free, so I don't have to pay for it, and I get it before everybody else. What's the drawback of that?
That's actually exactly what I'm thinking. Unless you've left out some sort of important detail so that you could draw out this story more than it needs to be, everything that you've said so far sounds like a win on everybody's behalf. So what is there to lose? What is the downside, DSP? Please tell us.
Well, here's the thing. There's a drawback if you're an honest person, okay? Literally, there's a drawback if you're an honest person. If you're a dishonest person who all you care about is personal gain, then there's no drawback at all. You're 100%, you're living easy, right? Easy street. Right down the fucking yellow brick road. But anyone else, if you have actual integrity or moral problems, you know, with not being able to be honest with your audience, there's a problem.
Well, then I guess everything's all good, DSP. Get as many free copies of games as you want. Get them as early as you possibly can. Because given the numerous examples throughout the years of the times that you've lied to your audience and scammed them, you obviously don't take any issue with deceiving your viewers. You obviously don't care whether or not you're being honest with them, despite all of the claims that you do. So please, go get your bag, get your day one views, DSP, maximize your profit so that everybody can continue to follow your WWE Champions account and watch how much you spend. Because even when you're living high on the hog, even when you're up, everybody is still pointing and laughing at you.
So allow me to explain. Okay? When they send you these early games, there is always an agreement you must sign in order to have access to these games. There is never a single instance where they will just mail you something and say, here it is. Okay? There's been a few instances for me that did happen.
I can't stand this. This is one of my least favorite things that he does. He tells you, oh, this will never happen. This has never happened in the history of ever, except that happened to me a few times. Just don't speak in absolutes like this and then immediately prove yourself wrong. Immediately prove that everything that you just said was a waste of everybody's time.
But that was because Machinima, my old partner network, had no fucking idea what they were doing. Sometimes they would mail me a game I didn't even ask for. They mailed me, I think, Rock Band once, or was it Guitar Hero? I didn't even ask for it. They just sent it to my house. I was like, what the fuck is this? You know? But other times, you are under a legal agreement of how you can cover that game.
And of course, DSP is the exact type of person to look a gift horse in the mouth. Machinima did him a nicety and sent him some free games, maybe even games that he would be willing to cover on his channel and bring in more views and therefore more money. But instead of being appreciative that he was given something for free that he would have had to have paid for otherwise, he belittles this now non-existent company and says that they don't know what they were doing. I bet you he wasn't saying that when he was given a free copy of Fallout 4 for release, but of course that's just cherry picking. That's playing semantics.
So let's just do a case in point. Let's say, for example, you were told you're going to get access to the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC for Elden Ring early. You're going to get it 1 week early, and you're going to be able to make content. Are you kidding me? Do you know how many people will watch my content if I get to play the game a whole week early? I will get a boost in views, boost in attention, likely a boost in support on the streams, in the videos. People will go crazy if I got to play Shadow of the Erdtree a week early, right?
I really hope that the person in this hypothetical is supposed to be a different content creator and not DSP. Because if this hypothetical person is in fact supposed to be the guy, then I'm willing to say that no, not everybody is going to be excited that you're going to be playing this DLC a whole 1 week earlier. And that simply boils down to the fact that nobody wants to watch garbage gameplay as their first impression. I've never seen anybody make video games look less appealing than DSP. So no, I'm not inclined to believe that people would be flocking to his channel even if he did get to play the DLC earlier, even if it was an entire month earlier. I'll say this to my dying breath, DSP really is the worst way to consume any sort of gaming content, and he makes any enjoyable experience of a video game look absolutely miserable.
So absolutely, I'm going to do everything in my power as a content creator to be able to do that. Okay? Now, this is a hypothetical. This has not happened. I'm just saying this is an example of what will happen. So you're working with this PR agent to hash this out. And the PR agent would say, okay, what platform do you want it? Blah, blah, blah. You work all that out. And then they will send you an agreement. And the agreement will usually read to something like this. So you agree by accepting this agreement and the copy of the game that you will only put out such and such content in such and such a way in such and such an order so as not to massively spoil or in a way that does not hurt the game. What does that mean? Well, first of all, a lot of these games have timing of when you can do things. They'll first allow you to put out an early access teaser. Maybe you can only play the first 2 hours of the DLC, and then you can't upload or stream anything else. That's your limit. Then you get in trouble if you go past that. Okay? You're able to put out an early impressions video where you can only talk about the first 2 hours, transparently. Then you'll be told there's a review embargo, and you can formally review the game on this date, which is usually a few days before the game actually has a full release for everybody else. Okay? So you can't stream the rest of it, but you can at least make a review of it. Then, usually and typically, you're told you can still play the game early, maybe a day or two earlier than everybody else, and you have free reign to do whatever you want. So maybe it's like 2 days before everyone else gets it, you can play it and stream it fully, so you do.
And I apologize for letting him ramble on as long as he did, but there didn't appear to be any logical stopping point because he talks in such a strange way. But everything that he's said so far sounds pretty sweet for everybody involved. You get the game early, you get to show it off to the people that are watching you, you get to show them your first impressions and what you think about the game pretty transparently. It all sounds pretty robust if you ask me. And if at any point you don't agree with any of those things, you don't have to sign the legally binding contract. That's actually the best part if you ask me, that if any point you don't agree with what's in the contract that you have to sign, you just don't have to sign it and you don't get the game early. I'm just curious as to how DSP is going to spin this into a negative. How is he going to make this a bad thing? Because like I said, so far everything sounds pretty robust and chill. And that's the exact type of content that DSP loves over on DSP Space Gaming.
So what ends up happening in most cases, most new games already are in their entirety on the internet before the game even is available for public sale. Don't you think that kind of kills the whole idea of hype behind a video game? Like, do you remember the days when there was a big game release and everyone ran out to play it on day one, and all of a sudden the whole internet was abuzz with talk about what you're experiencing in the game and the plot and the secret boss and stuff like that? Now, literally the entire game is on the internet early. People know about how the game plays 2 weeks in advance because of the early impressions. People already know the first few hours of every game. The entire game is there a few days early. So what exactly is the hype behind a game today?
I mean, I would imagine that the hype behind a video game at this point is to actually play the video game. I mean, it's really no different from when DSP was putting up entire playthroughs day one, is it? And I think this would go without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Nobody is being forced to watch early reviews of games. Nobody is forced to watch these full playthroughs that are out a couple of days early. If you're interested in playing a game, it is up to you whether or not you spoil yourself on the game. I mean, Phil himself says that he goes out of his way to not spoil himself on new games. So what impact does this actually have on DSP? Why is he talking about it? Why is he concerning himself with how other people are enjoying their video games and how they're enjoying their video game media? Given how little impact this actually has on him, according to his own words, this entire segment just comes off as resentment towards the video games industry for taking away his day one views, which I could absolutely understand him being upset about if he were to just come out and say it like that. But instead, he likes to play pretend that he actually cares about other people and the way that they experience their video games, which just isn't the case. He couldn't give a shit less.
And the answer is there is none. These game companies, in their hunger to create hype for their games, actually kill all hype for their games with this practice. Back in the day, the reason that gaming journalists got copies of games early was a very good reason. Print medium. Back then, in order to get a game review, there was no full internet. So you had to go to the store and you had to buy Electronic Gaming Monthly, Game Pro, PlayStation Magazine, Xbox Magazine, PC Gamer. And those print mediums would need to get access to the game early so they could play it, review it, and print the copies of the magazine to ship to the store first so you could read the review and then judge if you want to buy the game on release day. There is literally no good reason at all for game companies to be sending early access to anyone. All it does is spoil the game and create an air of disingenuous content for the internet. Allow me to explain what I mean by that.
And before he gets into that, I just want to point out that he seems to understand that back in the day when things went into print media and people had to ship magazines to store, that there was a need for these people to get these games early so that they could review them and get them there on time. But he doesn't understand now that when people review games for their own YouTube channels, that they still need a period of time in order to play the game, come up with a cohesive thought about the game, and then put it into a quality video that people are actually going to want to watch and take information from. I mean, I shouldn't be shocked by this information because DSP doesn't put any sort of thought or effort into any of his videos. I can say that till I'm blue in the face. But I know for a fact that he's watched these videos, he's seen these reviews, he's seen content creators that do actually put effort into their videos. Does he genuinely not understand that it takes an amount of time to do that? That writing the scripts for those reviews is a timely process, and making sure that they are cohesive and informative at the same time is something that is to be applauded? Maybe it's because he fancied himself a game reviewer when he was doing The Hateful Truth. But as anybody who's actually watched any of those could tell you, those were barely informative at all. Most of the time it was just inane rambling that ultimately amounted to nothing and no information being learned. But it's for that very reason that these people are given an amount of time that would actually make sense, so that they have time to write a script, so that they have time to actually edit their videos in an entertaining way. Because a competent review that people actually enjoy is going to be fantastic marketing for your game and build plenty of hype. On the other hand, something like The Hateful Truth is going to do a disservice to your game, because I don't think that any game should be associated with this guy and his uninformed opinions for 20 minutes at a time.
If you are one of these content creators who gets games early, you're in the circle, as they would say. You know all the PR agents for all the big publishers. They know you. They start offering you things early. They start offering you access. Hey, we'll fly you out to an event. You can cover a game early. You know, you get, basically it's the life, right? How many YouTubers that are big do you know they get everything early? They fly out to events. They do all this special hoity-toity stuff. Do you know why they get that? Because they're butt kissers. Because they literally agree to all of these agreements to get out and do good for themselves. But is it honest? Well, allow me to explain my take on this.
Why would I need your take on this, DSP? You just laid out the entire scenario. You just told me how all of it works, apparently, and from my perspective, it sounds pretty cool. And it seems pretty short-sighted to just consider all of these people butt kissers because they go out to these events and they get these games early because they agree to the contracts. Especially given the fact that in this very scenario that you've laid out, the contract that apparently these people are signing has nothing dishonest in it. So going based off of all of the information that you've given us so far, it sounds like these people are pleasant to work with, uphold their end of the deal, and provide entertaining content to people who want to see it. That's why, again, this entire segment just seems like a cope because you're incapable of networking, because you don't actually want to be associated with any of the people that are in the industry that you work in. And I want to point out that I'm using the word work very lightly. I just think that it's really amusing how upset he gets about other people just being easy to work with and doing the content that people want to see. He's just got such a warped perspective about this entire content creation thing, especially when it comes to video games.
Think of it this way. You get an early copy of a game. That game sucks. But you're told all you can do is 2 hours of gameplay. It's all you can show. All you can do is do an early impressions video. You can't review the game until a few days before it comes out. And then you get to stream that game 2 days early. If that game sucks, are you going to say in your early impressions that it really sucks? Or are you going to say, well, maybe there's some things I like and don't like. I can't wait to play more to find out. If you say the game sucks up front, even if it does, who's going to care about you covering the rest of that game? No one. No one wants to see you stream it early. No one wants to care about your review. You already said it sucked in the early impressions. So how many early impressions videos out there do you really think you're going to say this game sucks?
Well, it all depends on the content creator, DSP. If they're willing to risk their reputation and recommend games that they actually don't think are good, that's entirely up to them. Also, just because you don't enjoy a game doesn't mean that you can't continue to make content about that game. If you genuinely don't think that the game is very good during your first impressions, you could tell your audience that and tell them that you're going to continue to play and see if it gets any better and keep them informed. I'm sure that they would like to know. If there's aspects to a game that you don't like and aspects to a game that you do enjoy, then I would imagine you would just divulge on that information and tell them like it is. But of course, for DSP, everything is black and white. If you don't like one aspect of a game, apparently you're just not going to disclose that information and kiss the game's ass because you don't get any views if you don't. I mean, I've never seen it work that way. I've absolutely seen negative reviews of video games, but I also don't live in the pignatized delusional world of DSP.
Nearly none. There will be a few people who will break the mold and be honest, but you'll probably usually notice those people who do that are not the ones who get games early all the time. Maybe every once in a while they do, and then all of a sudden you notice they don't do it anymore, okay? We'll follow that in a minute. So already, if you know you're getting a game early and you're going to get this coverage, in the back of your mind, what are you thinking? man, the more positively I talk about this game, the more people are going to want to see me play it early, the more people will want to see my review, and the more money I'm going to make. So why would I say it sucks?
Because I would imagine that your ultimate goal of reviewing video games is to be a trustworthy reviewer that people know that they can go to and get an honest review from DSP. And in doing that, you are going to wind up getting more money in the future. You're going to have people continuously come back to you again and again and again to watch reviews because they genuinely trust your opinion. Not everybody is as short-sighted as you, DSP. Not everybody just goes crazy because they see the dollar signs like you do. Some people really do value their authenticity and honesty to their audience. And I think that it's really telling that you think that everybody in the world is that flippant, because to me that just sounds like you're trying to excuse some of your own behaviors and thoughts.
So innately, just the way that this relationship exists, it makes that person, that content creator, have a monstrous temptation to lie about the game. You see? Now, of course, they can always hide behind the fact and say, oh, well, it was just an early impressions, I didn't really play the full game or whatever, but it doesn't matter. There's the temptation will always be there. If you have personal gain and benefit from saying a game is good, why wouldn't you?
Because if you say that the game is good and you're supposed to be a trustworthy review and it actually turns out that the game isn't good and you were a paid shill, people will remember that. I swear that I can't mention Payday 3 without people bringing up the fact that Actman told them that the game was going to be good and to trust in him, and when they did so, it turned out poorly. Unfortunately for the Actman, in that action, he managed to tarnish some of his reputation for a lot of people. So big ups a lot of people, obviously. And that's actually the repercussion that would happen. That's the natural conclusion that people would come to. And how many times in a row can you recommend a bad video game before people just stop coming to your videos because they know you're a paid shill that nobody has respect for?
Now, in addition to that, think of it this way. If you continue to get things early, you will continue to get early access, early preview videos, reviews, and then streaming it earlier than everybody else, that's going to continue to make you money. That's going to continue to allow you to have business success on the internet. So why on earth, unless a game really was a bad dumpster fire, why on earth would you have any incentive to say something was bad? And if you say games are good and these publishers now make money as a basis from your content, they'll continue to send you free stuff because they know, oh, you're their golden boy now. You're our money train. You're our ticket. If we give you early stuff, you make it look good, everyone goes out and buys it, and now we make money off of it, right? So it's this symbiotic relationship where you say stuff is good, you continue to get stuff early, you profit, they profit, and continue to send you the stuff early. That's the situation with these games, okay?
I would imagine that any reviewer worth their salt who actually has passion for video games or the video game industry would not want these video game publishers and developers to benefit off of a bad game. So of course they wouldn't go out of their way to hype up a game that they don't think that they should be making any money off of. Now, on the off chance that a bad reviewer does actually shill a game that doesn't deserve it, it's entirely up to the audience whether or not they continue to watch this person's videos and give them their time. Now, I can't make those people stop watching the reviewers, and I can't make every reviewer honestly review a game, and I never would want to, because I think ultimately that's up to each individual person and everybody's going to make their own decisions and they should be allowed to do that. But of course, DSP's not interested in that. He doesn't want people to make their own decisions. He wants absolute control over every decision they make and all of their thoughts, because anybody who doesn't think exactly like DSP and carry out all of the decisions that he would is obviously a damn dirty detractor who needs to be wiped off the face of the planet in Minecraft, obviously.
Now, that's how it's always been. Literally, that's how it has been, okay? When you have review embargoes and you say you cannot actually talk about your feelings about the game till the day of the review, literally, that is a not so written but unspoken rule. You can't criticize a video game till the review date, okay? So let's say, again, Shadow of the Erd Tree comes out, what, late June? What if I was told that I could review it 4 days before it comes out? I literally can only play the first 2 hours, and I literally cannot criticize the game during the 2 hours of gameplay because that's considered a review. I have to just play it and comment on you know, elements of the game, like react to it, but I literally can't say this is good or this is bad. I have to just play it and then let the content speak for itself. And then when the review embargo lifts, I can release a formal review and then I can give you my opinions on the game. But everything up to the date of the review embargo is literally a paid advertisement.
I've heard him mention this before, that people are allowed to play the game on stream for early impressions, but can't actually commentate on whether or not they like something. That the content just has to speak for itself. And I'm struggling to see how that's actually an issue. You watch this person that you know and love play a video game, and you should be able to tell by their mannerisms, by the way that they speak and the way that they look if they have a face cam, whether or not they're enjoying something. And even if there was no commentary whatsoever, if you're watching a video game being played, you should be able to tell whether or not that's a game that you're going to be interested in. You should be able to identify mechanics that you would or wouldn't like yourself. To me, that's the primary difference between watching a first impressions video and an actual review. For some games, I don't want every single mechanic broken down piece by piece and explained in great detail. Sometimes I do want to see some genuine gameplay so I can determine whether or not I'm interested in the game myself. Regardless of my personal preference though, I'm failing to see how anybody would have an issue with this setup. That's of course assuming that the person you're watching isn't saying only positive things while having negatives that they're not allowed to say.
Now you might say, well, wait a minute, how is it a paid advertisement if you didn't receive any monetary compensation from the game publisher? Because compensation doesn't have to be monetary. Compensation can be attention, views, and exclusive access. And that's exactly what it is. You are paid with exclusive access to a piece of content to then not talk honestly about the content until a certain date. That is called paid exclusivity. That's exactly what it is. It's an actual paid advertisement. So that is why you'll notice whenever these companies do these promotions and give these gamers the stuff early, they have to put, usually in the video descriptions, in the posts on social media, hashtag ad. But the thing is, no one cares. Literally no one pays attention to that. They all just say, oh, look, so this big streamer who I know got a game early, let's go watch them play it. Unbeknownst to you, they literally can't be honest about what's in that content. It's all fluff. It's all advertisement because they can't review the game because that's a breaking of their terms of service or their user agreement with the publisher to get that game early.
And I think that DSP really nailed something there, but he doesn't quite realize what he said. People don't care. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is, obviously I'm kidding, but seriously, there are a lot of people who genuinely just don't care whether or not their content creator of choice is being paid to play a game early or not. Some of them don't even care if they're being paid to say positive things about the game. Because the reason that they're there is because they like the content creator. They like the personality that they bring. They find entertainment in the content that they create regardless of what the game is or isn't. And that's of course before even addressing the fact that there's many people out there that do understand that this is how review copies work and that this is how the industry has been going for a very long time. And yet they still choose to navigate this minefield and watch these early reviews and take everything with a grain of salt and come to their own determination. Because unlike DSP, that's something that many people can do. They can put their own logic to the test and figure out through all of the pieces that they were given from these reviewers whether or not they're going to enjoy the game and whether or not it's going to be worth their money. There's absolutely pitfalls to this process in which people review video games online now. But for people who don't care, this process is fantastic, and for people who do actually care, the process can absolutely be worked with. It's only the people in the middle who pretend to care but yet need all of their opinions force-fed to them through these content creators that suffer. And pardon me if this is a little cold, but if you're one of those people and this is a problem for you, then I guess you get what you get and you get to suffer.
And this happens all the time, but no one pays attention to it, and we all just act like it's normal. It's because it's been normalized now. It's normal that people in the industry get stuff early and cannot be honest about it because it's an ad, but we just accept it, right? So these people who are the golden boys of the gaming industry get everything early, kiss its butt, make tons of bank doing it, continue that vicious cycle of over-promotion for literal nothing. People keep throwing them fucking money and popularity, and then you get game after game after game that comes out that sucks shit, but you fell for the trap. That's what I hate about modern gaming.
Why is he contributing all of these bad games selling well to all of these content creators that are getting early review copies of these games? Does he have any sort of data or receipts in order to back this up, or is he just coming up with this out of his ass? Because I don't think that review copies even have to exist for people to just accept slop video games at this point. I mean, we're quite literally looking at a guy who has spent $17,000 on a Candy Crush mobile clone. A guy who will buy every single yearly Call of Duty release despite saying that he hates it and the company that's made it. So is this him outright admitting that he's being affected by all of these early game reviewers praising games that don't deserve it? Or is he just a prime example of exactly what I'm trying to say, that people are going to continue to buy bad games because they just accept whatever's in front of them for a brief amount of good time?
Back in the day, 10 years ago, it was all everyone on equal ground. Go buy the game, go play it, put the content up at the same time, and everyone can be honest. Today, it doesn't even matter if you're honest. There's already 10 to 15 people who have kissed the game's butt because they got paid to do so. It's a horrible, horrible slippery slope that we have slid the fuck down and don't realize we're sliding down. Okay?
I disagree, DSP, and I think that the process that they're using now has been in use for quite a while at this point. So anybody who cares about the video games industry or cares about whether or not they're getting an honest review has already figured out what they're going to do. And obviously anybody who doesn't care whether or not they're getting an honest review still doesn't care. So I don't know who you think that you're informing. I don't know who you think that you're breaking the news to. At the end of the day, it's up to every individual on what they're going to do, whether or not they watch this content creator or that content creator, whether or not these reviewers honestly review a game because of their own integrity, or whether or not they just become paid shills and get their money. That's for each person to make their own decision, and there's nothing that I can do one way or another. But what I can do is cut this clip right now, because it is a very long clip and I think that I'm done for today. Hopefully I'll catch you in the part 2 where he continues this rant and then goes on to talk about the new Marvel game that is coming out. But of course none of that can happen before we take a look at some of the comments from my last video, so of course it's big ups to the 60 Skulls. Crooked Hound says, I find it odd to hear him complain about gaming journalists when he is a prime example of the absolute worst gaming journalist. Whether he would call himself that or not, between his opinion on games, his ability to be informative, and how biased he is towards companies, he's no better than them, if not way worse. And by the way, Atlas agrees, because he's absolutely guilty of all of the same behavior that he claims to hate from these gaming journalists. The only real difference, if you ask me, is that they can get a modicum of respect from the general public because they don't behave in the same way that DSP does emotionally. These games journalists typically don't lash out at these companies and go tell the devs to go do things in Minecraft. Fate's Frozen Flame says, DSP doesn't understand what art style is. I guarantee he thinks that means 1080p and buttery smooth 60 frames a second, or whatever buzzwords he wants to use. And I'm inclined to agree with you, because he just fundamentally doesn't understand that an art style is far more important than the general hyper-realistic graphics that so many games nowadays are doing. Despite being 42 years old, he seems to be suffering from the same affliction that afflicts so many Zoomer styles out there. And that's if there's not enough things moving on screen, if there's not enough flashing colors, if there's not enough bright lights going off, his brain just can't seem to focus on it and he becomes uninterested. I guess we can just be thankful that all of those stylized games that kick ass DS people just never get to experience, and they're probably better off that way. And Go to Boehm says, I know I did not just hear the man who admitted himself that he has no friends, only leaves his house once a week, and that chat is his only social interaction. Call anyone else antisocial. Unfortunately, I have to inform you that you absolutely did. As ironic as it is, DSP loves to pretend that anybody who disagrees with him is some basement-dwelling isolationist style person, when the reality is the roles are exactly reversed. Every detractor that I've ever talked to has a bustling social life and has plenty of friends online and offline that they interact with on a daily basis, and they also have real people jobs. But of course, DSP lives in his hypnotized delusional world where up is down and down is up. So as far as he perceives the world, he's actually the one that is having all sorts of meaningful social interaction. Meanwhile, everybody else is just living under a rock and being antisocial. Sound good? Sounds good to me. And by the way, God agrees. But speaking of things that God would agree with and appreciate, I want to give a shout out to everybody who watched the video, especially if you made it this far. Hopefully I'll catch all of you guys in the next video, but until then, make sure that you check out other detractor content and dive deeper into that. Snortex.